My father chose his girlfriend over us and refuses to let me return home because she feels uncomfortable with me. So, I called CPS and turned his life upside down. My mother was my world. I remember reading books, watching documentaries, and going on road trips with her. She baked my sister and me cookies whenever we were sick. She and Dad would take us hiking every other week. I still miss her even now. When I was 11 years old, she passed away from a driving accident. It was the hardest year in my life, and it hasn't gotten easier. 2 years after she passed, my father started dating a woman named Nicole, and 4 years later, they're getting married. Nicole is younger than my father. After dating Nicole, I saw my father come back into his shell, but it turned into something else. Nicole brought adventure back into his life, but they often went on elaborate trips and frequent night outs. During all of this, I felt neglected. My father slowly stopped taking my sister and me on our weekly hikes. He started speaking less and less over calls, and he even once forgot my mother's birthday. After she came into our lives, I started losing my father. He just wasn't there anymore. One time, when my sister and I were home alone, she fell down the stairs and got a huge cut on her forehead. It was clear she needed stitches, so I called my father immediately. Nicole answered the phone, and I told her to give the phone to my father. She refused, saying he was busy, and before I could get another word in, she disconnected the call. I embarrassingly had to ask the neighbor to bring us to urgent care, where my dad later met us. This woman at one point removed my mother's picture from the fire mantle to put up a photo of her and my dad from their trip to Washington. The thing that tipped me over was when she made my father forget about my mother's birthday. Every year, my sister and I go with our father to visit my mother on her birthday. It was an annual tradition even before Nicole entered our lives. Nicole and my father went on a trip to Florida and were supposed to be back 3 days before my mother's birthday. But, because this woman is motion sick, my father decided to break the drive back into small intervals to make it easier on her. Because of this, he ended up missing our annual trip. He didn't even call us. Not even a week later, my father has the nerve to tell us about an exciting surprise. Nicole is pregnant. I get angry and tell my father, "You need to knock her butt up when you can't even be here for us." I then look at Nicole and tell her she is a disgusting piece of trash and to get out of our lives. My father gets angry and yells at me to go up to my room. Later, my grandpa unexpectedly came over to pick me up. My father didn't text me poop. Even as I left, he wouldn't even look at me. It's been 2 days, and I'm still at my grandparents' home. I feel ashamed for saying what I said, yet I don't feel overwhelming regret. Update: regarding Thanksgiving dinner, when my dad and Nicole arrived, I asked if I could speak with them both. My dad said he didn't want to talk and went into the living room. Nicole still remained by the front door, so I apologized for insulting her. She replied that she needed to leave and went to the living room. Overall, she still seemed rightfully angry with me. Dinner was awkward because my grandma would try to get my dad and me to talk, but he wouldn't really bother. After dinner, I pulled him aside and apologized again. He ignored me and went straight to Nicole. I still wasn't sure if I was heading back with him or not, so I packed everything just in case. When he was getting ready to leave, I asked him if I could come back home. He said Nicole wasn't comfortable having me home even though it had been a few days since the incident. I spent the entire night crying on the phone with my sister. Therapy and living situation. After having my call with my maternal grandpa, he called my paternal grandparents a couple of days later to discuss my situation. I overheard the call between them. My maternal grandpa expressed he was concerned about me, especially my mental state, and asked my paternal grandparents if they were willing to talk to my dad about putting me in therapy. My grandparents said they'd be willing to take me to their church's mental support group or talk with their faith leader who specializes in grief counseling. My grandpa pushed back on the idea and mentioned a need for more professional help, but they were not receptive to the idea. All three of them also had a heated conversation about my living arrangement. My grandpa said it was ridiculous for a grown man to throw out their daughter, and it was shameful that my paternal grandparents were not hard-pressed to help me get back home. That's all I heard regarding the conversation. Now, my grandma started taking me to weekly private sessions with the faith leader. I'm not entirely happy with the arrangement, but it has helped me begin to process my grief in a healthier way. Also, I am still living with my grandparents. I apologized over and over through text to my dad and through my grandparents, but he has not responded. My maternal grandpa has called my dad many times, but my dad blocked him. I am contemplating telling my school counselor next semester all the details regarding my dad and not omitting anything to protect him. I also wasn't invited to my dad and Nicole's Christmas dinner, which hurt, but I'm starting to not care to have a relationship with my dad. I don't know if my feelings will change. In a twisted way, it was good he didn't let me go back home with him. The space has helped me focus on myself. Update 2. After I scheduled a meeting with my counselor, I mentioned it while calling my sister. On the call, I never explicitly mentioned my intention to report him, but she started freaking out and telling me it was not a good idea. She ended up crying on call, saying that I would be hurting our father if I reported him. I told her I wouldn't attend the meeting to help her calm down. Regardless, I still planned on going to the counselor meeting. I scheduled the conference during the second week of January while my father was out in California. The night before the meeting, I got a call from my father. He said that if I ever wanted a place to live again, I should not spread lies about him to the counselor. I said I would never do that, which was the end of the call. This was the first time I'd spoken to him in days, and I never gave any indication of me reporting him. My sister must have said something, so I called her to talk. I asked her why she would tell him something like this, and she said that he called her to ask what I was doing. She slipped up and said to him I planned to meet with the counselor. I still ended up going to the counselor meeting, and I told him everything that was going on. I told the counselor to please not notify my father about the meeting, and he agreed. At the very end, The counselor gave me 2 to 3 pamphlets for mental health support and said he'll follow up with me. He also dodged my questions regarding what will happen now. A day later, right after I got home from school, my paternal grandpa called me over and said he wanted to talk. He told me that the school called my father to set up a meeting with the counselor. He started to yell and get angry with me, saying that if I pull this poop, they'll take my sister and the baby away. He also said that I wasn't raised to lie and continued to reprimand me. I never thought my grandpa was capable of being this way, but it scared me how angry he got. I don't know exactly what happened in the counselor's meeting with my father. From the call between my grandpa and father, I learned there was a police officer present in the meeting and that they would be doing a wellness check. Also, my father denied everything that I told the counselor and chalked it up to me being spiteful because I lost my mom. I wasn't in a good mental state afterward, and I am still not. Update 3. I am now living with my maternal grandparents. CPS. Meeting went well. A lot of the questions centered around my sister's situation, but I brought up the urgent care situation and my dad's absence. I brought along conversation recordings too, but they really couldn't do anything with them. I heard that they will speak with a couple more family members and Nicole. My grandpa noticed bruising around the nape of my sister's neck, and I noticed a lot of bruising on one part of her abdomen while helping her change. My sister is also not in a state where she is able to fully hold conversations, but from what she was able to tell me, my dad hit her on the neck and threw something at her stomach while she was asleep. Everything has been reported to CPS and police. At school, the front office lady called me up over the intercom during the middle of my exam. I go over, and I see my dad standing there. This man pulled me out of class, so he can bring me back home. I immediately told him that I'm not coming, and he said I don't have a choice in this and to move. By the way, during all of this, we are still standing in the front office. I then yell at him to leave, and he yelled at me to shut up and move. Front office lady got involved and asked if there was a problem. I told her that I refused to go back with him and asked her to call my grandpa. My dad then grabbed my arm and tried dragging me out of the front office, and I just kept screaming. The lady called the security officer, and he came over. My dad told him I'm acting like a brat and am the problem child. I told the officer that I now live with my grandpa and not him. They call another officer over, and he tells me that I'm only allowed to leave with my father. The officers leave, and my dad gripped my wrist and pulled me towards his car. Then, he effing orders me to get into the car or else. I try getting away, but he shoves me into the passenger seat. He then warned me not to try anything and drove off back to his house. He then says I have to care for my sister while he's at work this week because I'm responsible for what happened to her, and this is my way of paying back for everything I put him through. He then texts me a minute after he leaves telling me to not effing try anything and that he'll physically discipline me if he has to. A while after he left, I called the cops and said I was taken against my will back to his house and told them about him manhandling me. Cops came over, and maternal grandpa came over. Since no caretaker was home for my sister, and my father didn't pick up his phone, the cops allowed my grandpa to take her back home with us. They located my father a bit ago and arrested him. It's a poop show right now, but now, my sister is living with me and maternal grandpa, so if she is at least safe.